As people are looking at modernization, it's a bit of a trade-off. What we found is that if we can reduce their risk by giving them a path to generate the benefits of getting out of the data center business, but still being able to maintain the demands that the business is placing on them, it's driving a lot of variance for them to take more risk and start to really prioritize the things that matter most.
Welcome to 6.5 in the booth here in sunny Las Vegas. I'm Dave Nicholson. We're here at HPE Discover, and I'm here with my co-host, Tom Hollingsworth. Good to see you, Tom. We have two special guests from 1111 Systems. We're going to be talking about simplifying infrastructure, cloud, and security, and the decisions that wrap around that. We're joined by Dante Orsini, Chief Revenue Officer, and Justin Giardina, Chief Technology Officer, both from 1111 Systems. Welcome, gentlemen.
Likewise, thanks for helping us.
So, Dante, set the stage for us. When enterprise leaders are being asked to modernize infrastructure and adopt AI, strengthen security, and manage costs all at the same time, what is the 1111 perspective on that, and what are you doing with HPE to help people realize that?
Dave, it's a great question. First of all, 1111 is a global managed infrastructure services provider, and we've been working with HPE forever to make sure that we can provide people with a resilient cloud platform for infrastructure as a service, backup as a service, disaster recovery as a service, even managed network services, right? So when we look at this, modernization term, seems like every decade we go through this like multiple times, but right now we're in a really unique environment where you've got enabling technologies that are changing the world with AI. You've got an increasingly rapidly rising cost of hardware, and you still got the demands, as you mentioned, across the top of infrastructure and IT leaders to continue to innovate and grow the business. Meanwhile, they're adopting various different platforms at a breakneck speed, which creates a lot of security concerns. So we're right in the center of that, helping people achieve the mission and deliver managed services to help them do it.
Justin, what about security? What should people be concerned about as they modernize?
I really think that Dante hit the nail on the head about all the various angles with security. We always talk about this. We used to have a picture that hung up in our kitchen at the office that said the best security policy is the combination of the layers, where it showed a sandwich with each individual layer, like the bun and the meat and the cheese and so forth. So I think that although a lot of the angles that we have to protect against today aren't necessarily new, it's really your comprehensive strategy around security and how security fits into each one of those layers to actually provide something successful for your organization.
Dante, we've heard a lot over the last several months about the rising costs related to things like hardware, but also software licensing. And I know that when organizations look to evaluate how they are making decisions strategically, those costs have to come into play. What are some of the factors that are kind of complicating this transition to a more modern environment that kind of play into those challenges?
I think when we look at that, clearly there's been a lot of changes in the market, right? Like you said, both hardware and software, a lot of pressures there. But I think when people are contemplating what the future of that platform looks like, you've got a long history of using certain technologies that you can run at scale, that you've got a lot of, not just security, but a lot of integration to from various different third parties. So the ecosystem that's been built over the last 15 years, it's not very easy to pivot away from that. And I think when people do consider that, they have to. They start to realize that everything that runs this infrastructure, from engineering to all the other, things that plug into it, don't categorically just lift and shift to another platform. We've seen the same thing happen as people start to look at, where they're going to leverage various different cloud services or SaaS services, right? But it doesn't change, the level of risk that company's willing to take on. Now you just have to look at this beyond just the cost, right? And really look at the total cost of ownership. And when we see that people do that, a lot of folks they want to make sure they continue to have that stable platform so they continue to just not operate, but also grow. And I think that there's a lot of factors that weigh into that. So as people are looking at modernization, it's a bit of a trade-off, right? Am I going to continue to maintain control over these certain things? And can I do it at the right type of SLA that the business is requiring me to do? Or some of these things that may sound attractive because one component of the equation may have been rising in cost. I think the biggest thing that we've seen recently, especially this year, is what's happening to the hardware space. that's really putting a lot of pressure on people to rethink, are they going to continue to stay in the infrastructure game themselves or continue to provide you the right operational framework to leverage other platforms, right? We found that we're in a position to where we are a very big VMware shop, right? We operate at scale, have been doing it globally for over 20 years at this point. And we see a lot of people contemplating those decisions right now. And what they quickly found is that if they're facing a really significant hardware refresh, oftentimes migrating from a VMware-based platform to another VMware-based platform is the easy button. And we've been facilitating a lot of that for organizations recently.
Sounds like there are a lot of complex factors that people maybe don't uncover initially that they need to spend a little bit of time in research uncovering so that they don't make the wrong decision and then go down a road that maybe leads them nowhere.
Yeah, correct. And we've seen it too, right? We've seen folks that are trying to entertain re-platforming certain parts of their business, and they'll take a more pragmatic approach to start with something small. And, for some folks that may be successful, we've also seen it swing the other way, right? And we've seen a lot of folks that just because there's been an increase in one of those components doesn't necessarily, force a refactoring conversation or a re-platforming conversation. But I do think that the rising cost of hardware has really opened up a lot of folks to think like, okay, is this something we want to continue to pursue? What we found is that if we can reduce their risk by giving them a path to generate the benefits of getting out of the data center business, but still being able to maintain the demands that the business is placing on them, by moving them from a similar, core platform to a hosted platform, it's driving a lot of variance for them to take more risk, right? And start to really prioritize the things that matter most. Back to that security conversation, back to that AI conversation.
So I'm going to double click on that a little bit. And it's handy that we have a real life CTO sitting right here with us. But this is going to be directed to you first, Dante. CTOs have a dilemma, and that is they have finite resources, but infinite demands placed upon their shoulders. I'm with you, brother. And they're responsible for running the business and changing the business at the same time, keeping the lights on, innovating. Again, infinite demands, finite resources. You must do it all. The board or the CEO goes to this guy and says, what's our AI strategy? And he says, you know what I want to do? I want to change our virtualization platform. Next thing he's going to hear is, thanks, you're fired. Because that is not an answer to addressing AI. So how do you balance that? What are the kinds of things? I want to go just a layer deeper on what 1111 is doing with HPE for those folks where it makes sense to overcome the friction associated with VMware, in this case, to move to something else. What does that look like? And then I want to get your take on this, about this idea of that challenge of trying to run the business and change the business at the same time.
Yeah, I think from our perspective, back to the CTO, right? Years ago, we saw a lot of people various different...
Just talk about him like he's not here.
That's right. So if I think about rewinding the clock a bit, right? As all these organizations were looking at modernizing any part of the business, very similar discussions have to happen. But our CTO got ahead of that and actually wrote some IP so we could actually drive a platform into that organization so we could actually look at what's running and give them a very good understanding of what it would look like to move that platform. And I don't just mean, the core, virtual machines and everything else, right? When you look at what's the compatibility look like between your on-prem infrastructure, potentially a hosted infrastructure, what does it look like from a networking perspective? Like all the things you need to consider that you can very quickly deduce with software, right? To give people a path on that set path forward. But I think what we've been very interested with, what we've been able to do with HPE is they share the same alignment with us to make sure that they can provide an alternative to someone continuing to build and scale their own data center, right? We just happen to be doing this with HPE equipment.
Yeah, got it. Well, okay, so Justin, is it a reasonable argument to make that 1111 and HPE combined can work with a company to change their virtualization strategy, thereby freeing up capital that can be dedicated towards AI innovation? Is that a reasonable statement to make?
I think it's reasonable. I think for me and any technical person, it's all about the journey and it's all about meeting the customer where they are. So we know, and I think all of us would collectively enjoy that if a customer came to us off the street and they had nothing and we had a complete blank slate to start from scratch, that would be great. But let me just tell you that that's usually not the type of customers we attract. So getting back on my journey concept and the journey that we took internally is, how can we start layering in some of the things around AI or modernization on a case-by-case basis with the ability to look big picture and know where we want to be, because that journey is not going to happen in a day, a month, a year, maybe even 2 years. So to answer your question, some of the concepts that Dante brought up is when a customer does look to, say, move to a public cloud, there's new networking challenges in there. There's new security challenges in there. There's new expertise challenges in there. And I think what differentiates 1111 and HPE outside of some of the industry is that we can provide that comprehensive solution and meet the customer where they are, provide them the best path for that individual piece, and then continue on with that journey till they get there. So sometimes it's easier. Sometimes the customer is a little bit smaller. They're more aggressive. We can move quicker. And sometimes with large enterprises, it takes multiple years. But that's really where we fit in and how we work with HPE to accommodate that.
Thanks for tuning in to 6.5 in the Booth here at HPE Discover 2026. Don't forget to subscribe, follow us on all the socials, and check out all the great coverage at 65media.com. We'll see you next time.